This is FAB 2000. It belongs to resistance class 4 as FAB 1000, but adds a secondary blocking mechanism. The pin configuration is quite familiar: 2 RBC pins, 2 standard pins and a single spool. The keyway doesn't look as claustrophobic as FAB 1000's, but navigating it even with the 15000 picks is not as easy as one might expect. Especially the RBC pins and generally high lift pins do cause trouble. This lock is interesting by its take on the secondary locking mechanism. It uses a sidebar controlled by sliders, although these sliders write on the inside of the lock bible. These sliders are actuated by the side of the key's spine, and also the actual sidebar is quite different compared to sidebars we usually see in pin tumbler locks. It's just a piece of steel wire. There seem to be only 2 cut depths in this system. The difference in cut depths is only 1.2 mm, while sidebar width is 1.5 mm. That doesn't leave all that many possibilities, given the sidebar is round. What is quite unique in this slider mechanism implementation is the fact that due to the shape of the slider, when being set, the slider causes counter-rotation. Also, the sidebar action doesn't isolate from the pin tumbler part, so it's beneficial to set the sliders early on. A bit of a letdown is that of the 3 slider chambers in the core, only 2 are populated. The last one is probably left for master keying purposes. The core also features a construction keying hole, which is aligned with the first chamber. The construction keyed version is sold with the 2-in-1 designation. Another interesting point is that the sidebar groove is accessible from the front, not being fully covered by the front of the core, which might allow for wire shim insertion, forcing the sliders to bind first and probably also in front to back order. Comparing the key to the closest relative FAB 1000 reveals interesting change in the key milling style. The FAB 1000 teeth are cut in a classical way, while FAB 2000 bitting resembles more one side of a slider track. They call it flat tooth milling, and the aim is to minimize the wear and tear. However, it's also interesting to note that right at the key's nose there is the usual spike. Not sure if that's an intent, milling hardware limitation, or just a result of an off-by-1 error. When gutting this cylinder, make sure to avoid the driver entering the empty slider spring chamber, otherwise you risk pricking the lock. The slider spring chambers are located at roughly 11 o'clock line in the core. The FAB 2000 also offers fair amount of anti-drill protection, and the slider tracks cause weakening of the core and probably can make core pulling a messy affair. Also, a security card is provided to protect against unauthorized key copying. As the current top of the FAB's line, its price is roughly €60 for a double Euro cylinder, which is almost 50% more compared to FAB 1000. One last thing worth mentioning is that one of the packaging types the FAB 2000 is being sold in is a blister, proudly showing the key bitting to the world. Given that today a single photo of the key is enough to duplicate it, I find it somewhat disturbing from the security standpoint. Well, you must be quite bored at this point, so let's see the FAB 2000 in action. This is FAB 2000. It's current FAB's best lock. And let's check how the picking goes. Checking pins first, nothing so far. So let's check the sidebar. Okay, nice click from second sidebar pin, or the second slider more. Nothing in chamber 3 is the first RBC pin. Nothing from chamber 5. Okay, something in chamber 3. And nice movement and click from chamber 5. These were the RBC pins. Now let's check if we can set number 1. That's our only and only spool. Okay, it seems to be set. Checking. Come on, number 1 seems to be okay. 2 seems to be okay, so only one missing should be chamber 4. This wording is sometimes fun to navigate. Come on. Okay, and we are open. I'm not going to do the full 360 because there is another sidebar groove and it would get caught in there. But it can be seen that it was picked. Now let's see what do we have inside. When gutting this lock, it's necessary to be careful because it can be bricked very easily thanks to several things in the core. Also because I don't have a follower with the notch there, it's best to gut it when the key is in, let's say, 5 o'clock position. So we begin to see the sidebar. Okay, core is out. Now I'm going to drop the sidebar first. As you can see, it's just a piece of steel wire. Here are the 2 sidebar springs. And now, as you can see, these are the, or hopefully you can see, these are the slider chambers, of which only the second and third one is populated. The number 1 is empty. I guess it's reserved for some master keying stuff. Oh, also you can see the residues of lubrication from the factory. So let's remove the sliders. Okay, and now let's take the pins out. Okay, what's left are those low cuts, chamber 3 and 5, where the RBC pins are located. Okay, pin number 5. And the last one. Come on, little fellow. Okay, here you can see the core. What's left are the 2 slider springs. These springs are interesting by the fact that they are not symmetric. They are tapered to the slider end, and the end that's in the core is not. Well, the parts are a bit sticky thanks to lubricant. Okay, so no modifications in the chambers itself. There you can see quite a lot of anti-drill protection in there. Here's the sidebar groove. These holes are for the springs. These are the chambers where the slider springs are located, and thanks to the fact that one of them is empty, it's very good trap for the driver pins. So when gutting, be careful not to let the driver enter this space, because otherwise you are going to have quite a lot of trouble. And last but not least, there's the construction keying hole. This lock is also being sold in 2-in-1 version, which has a construction key, or it's being marketed for the people who often lose or forget their keys. So it allows to, let's say, rekey the lock once without a locksmith's intervention. The grooves in the core, I think, also serve as a protection against core pulling, although I'm not sure when pulling the core out how deep would you go with the screw or whatever you use to pull it out, so not sure how effective is that. As you can see, the keyway somehow reminds of the FAB control keyway, this shape down there, and it takes some getting used to, and 15,000 picks are quite useful to navigate it. Now let's check the drivers. They are in a pretty standard configuration as far as higher end FAB locks are concerned. So there are 2 standards, 1 spool and 2 RBC pins. This lock also features a bit more drill protection. Here it's in the form of steel standard drivers, and also the last RBC pin is steel one. Now let's take out the springs carefully. Okay, as far as the Bible is concerned, there are two interesting things. The first one are the two sidebar grooves for some reason. I'm not sure if it was intention to get the sidebar caught in the other when the lock is being picked, because all you have to do is pick the sliders and you're free to move again. But it's sort of frustrating. The other part that's quite interesting is, as you can see, the sidebar grooves are free to see or enter from the front of the lock. They aren't hidden behind the core. So technically there are some attacks against the sidebar possible. Not that it would be needed if only two of the sliders are there, but technically it can be done. Other than that, there's standard drill protection of the front of the pin stack, and to be honest, these two marks, no idea why they are in there. They are present on quite some FAB logs, but to be honest, I don't know what's their purpose. Maybe some manufacturing stuff. If you know, please chime in. I'm eager to be teached what's their purpose. One last thing that's interesting is the bitting of the key. They, I think, call it the flat tooth style. As you can see, usually there would be a small hump between these two cuts. The cut is not, the hump is not there. So the look of these keys is also quite distinct compared to the rest of FAB's production line. So I will arrange everything for a close-up. The sliders of this lock are also interesting because their movement is not linear, but they let's say go in a circle around the core. Also, the steel sidebar does not allow too many positions, so I think there are only two, let's say, cuts possible. Maybe show you in here. You can see the track for the sliders. And what's also different compared to other locks is that these sliders can give you sort of counter rotation, so if set after some pins, then you get you might get some pins reset. Okay, so here's the detail of the pin stack. You can see the RBC pins are used on shorter key pins to allow them to hide down behind other pins. There you can see the sliders. As I said, I think there are only two types of these sliders, so only two depths are available. And also you can see the different, let's say, taper, or the taper on the slider spring end. The sidebar itself is just a round piece of metal. There's nothing fancy in there. The keyway is somewhat nasty. Navigating it is sometimes a bit of pain, but not all that bad. So that was FAB 2000. Thanks for watching and goodbye.